Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at question 5 for paper 2. We're going to look at how to write to inform, advise or persuade. So this is a real quick video just going through some real important bits of advice before your exam for English language paper 2. We're focusing specifically on your question 5, which is transactional writing. So by the end of this video you'll be able to recall how to approach question 5 on the exam, understand how to use the exam paper to your advantage, and you'll apply your understanding to practice some of the high value questions, which will be our question 5. Look at the exam question below and attempt the challenges that follow. So it says then, these days teenagers are consumed by the internet and technology. Social media and mobile phones can cause more harm than good, and we must break this addiction now. Write a blank to parents/a parenting website to express your views on this topic. So the first thing to notice here is that I've actually left a bit of a blank here, and that's because we don't know if a leaflet's going to come up, if it's going to be an article, a speech or a letter or anything like that really. So it's important to think about how would you approach each one of these. I'm going to talk about those in a bit more depth in a moment. The first thing to do whenever you get a question like this is to identify the TAP of the exam question. Now if you're not too sure about that, what we mean is the topic, the audience and the purpose. Secondly, what I'd like you to do is to come up with 3 or 4 ideas on this topic, and this is going to help you to formulate your main answer in your response. And the mega challenge, I want you to think about all of the different types of text that could come up. How would you approach each one of these? Which ones do you feel the most confident about? Which ones do you need to spend a little bit more time revising before the exam? Now, if you're not too sure how to lay out things like a letter or an essay, don't worry because we're going to be going through it in just a moment now. Last feedback. Check your answers against the ones below. So for the challenge then, we've got the TAP of the exam question. The topic is teenagers and their addiction to technology. The audience is going to be parents, and the purpose is to advise them on the use of technology with teenagers. Now it's really important that you go through this process because things like the audience would really dictate what kind of tone you need to use in your writing, because you want to actually make sure that you're either writing to advise, persuade and inform, and the audience is going to play a crucial role in how you approach that kind of question. Next then, for the super challenge, ideas may include but not limited to the dangers of social media, the benefits of technology and how to manage the use of devices. Remember, if you are giving advice, then it's important to say, these are some of the bad points, but this is how we address those bad points and move on from them as well. It's important as well to think about a teacher's top tip. So remember to consider the scope of the question. So what are the points within the question that you can expand upon? So it's a really important thing to think about when you do get the exam question. It is quite long-winded, but there's a purpose behind it. What they're trying to do is help you to come up with those ideas so you don't spend 10-15 minutes trying to think what on earth I'm going to write about. Have a look within the actual question and try and actually break down specifically what are they implying that they'd like you to actually talk about. What hints are they giving about potential topics within the actual question itself? Now what we're going to do is just have a quick look over the different forms that might come up in the exam. So the first one we're going to look at is a letter. So a lot of people struggle with this, but you're not to worry too much. As a minimum, students should include an indication that someone is sending a letter to someone and paragraphs. So that means, let's say if you forget completely to use things like the addresses, the dates and all that other kind of stuff that goes into it, as a bare minimum we want to make sure that you're saying dear sir, dear madam, to whom it may concern or something like that, and that you're writing in paragraphs. That is as a bare minimum. Okay, so we're talking about level 3, level 4 push for that one. Then for the more detailed or developed indicators, to get a higher grade in your response, you need to make sure you're using the following things. So the use of addresses, a date, a formal mode of address if required, so again dear sir or dear madam, or a named recipient. This is particularly important if they actually give you the name in the question, then it means you need to use the name in your response. Effectively fluent and sequenced paragraphs, that means that they flow one into the other, that they're all linked. And an appropriate mode of signing off, so yours sincerely and yours faithfully. If you're not too sure about the difference between these two, yours faithfully is when you don't know the person, and yours sincerely is when you have some form of a relationship with that person that you're writing to. So what I'd like to think about as we go through each of these different forms is how confident would you feel if this form of writing came in the exam? Now, if the answer is that you feel completely uncertain about it, then do check out our other videos that go into the different forms in more detail. Next, we have an article. So as a minimum, students should include the use of a simple title and paragraphs. So it's important that you don't spend a good 20 minutes trying to think, right, how am I going to come up with the most catchy, the most inspirational title in the world? Don't worry about it too much. You don't want to waste all that time just thinking about the title, okay? So as a minimum, make sure you've got the title, make sure you're writing in paragraphs. For more detailed or developed indicators, you should make sure you have a clear, apt, and original title. Again, if you can come up with this on the spot, then that's fantastic, but you shouldn't really be thinking about it for too much time. A strapline. So this is kind of like a little bit of a hint or something that kind of teases the person to actually make them want to read on. So a brief line just to say what the article is going to be about to grab our attention and make us want to read on. Subheadings. Now this is a fantastic thing to use to help you break your article down into paragraphs as well. An introductory paragraph, and just like the other ones, effectively fluent sequence paragraphs, making sure that they all flow one after the other. Next we have a leaflet. Now this is a bit of a strange one because you're not really going to write a leaflet in the conventional sense of the term, right? So back in secondary school, for example, if you've been told to make a leaflet in geography or history, chances are it'd include lots of images or you'd be folding up the paper. That's not really what we're going to do. Leaflet's main form is really going to be to inform people. If you think about how we use these in everyday kind of life. So as a minimum, you shouldn't use the use of a simple title, paragraphs or sections. Again, think about a typical leaflet, they will have sections in them as well. For a more detailed or developed one, you can have a clear and apt original title, organisational devices such as subheadings, boxes, bullet points, and just like all of the others, effectively fluently sequenced paragraphs as well. Next, we have the text of a speech. The reason why I called it a text of a speech is because we should know that you're not expected to read this out loud. So a simple address to the audience would be a minimum, writing it in sections, and a final address to the audience. It's important with a speech to know that the audience needs to be acknowledged at all times. So you should be making sure that you're using a lot of your DeForest techniques, your direct address, rhetorical questions, and things like that to make sure you're actually aware of who is you're aiming this speech towards. So we need to have a clear address to the audience, effectively fluently linked sections, rhetorical indicators, so rhetorical questions, and a clear sign off. So thank you for listening. And an essay. So we don't often cover this in English, so it's an important one to go over as well. So a simple introduction and conclusion, an effective introduction and convincing conclusion, and effectively fluently linked paragraphs to sequence a range of ideas. Now that we've looked at that, I want you to go back at the exam question and think about the challenges at the bottom. So here's the exam question again. So it says, these days, teenagers are consumed by the internet and technology. Social media and mobile phones cause more harm than good, and we must break this addiction now. Write a letter to parents in your community to express your views on this topic. So the first thing to think about is what features would you need to include when writing a letter? If you're not too sure, have a look back over in the previous part of the video. What would be the appropriate salutations, or the complementary close for this question? And what we mean by that is how would you start it and how would you end it? And the final one, look at the response on the next slide and evaluate the student's work. We're going to look at a number of comprehension questions to test our understanding and assess what someone else has actually done when trying to attempt this question themselves. Look at the exam response and attempt the challenges that follow. So you can see here then that the student has started with dear sir or madam. Now even though that is a good way to start your letter, it's important to note that there are other organisational features that we covered a moment ago that it's also missing out on. So it says to them, I'm writing to you to express a great concern I have for the teenagers in our community. Technology has invaded our homes and infected the minds of teenagers. The solution is simple. We need to reduce the use of technology before it's too late. There are many good things that technology has given us, improved communication, gaming and learning, to name just a few. Technology has the potential to provide a better future for young people. Did you know that education is 70% more accessible now than it was in the 90s? Technology gives young people a wealth of knowledge at their fingertips. It can be argued, however, that technology causes more bad things than good. A recent study from somewhere states that research has shown that students struggle to study online, and the temptation of social media and gaming causes a lack of concentration. So this proves that you should force teenagers not to use technology. So if you want to pause the video here and go through it at your own time, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead and look at our comprehension questions in the next part of the video. Look at the comprehension questions to test your understanding. So for number 1 then, what tone has been used in the writing? Try and justify your answer. Number 2, identify where the writer has used a hyperbole, which also means exaggeration. Number 3, identify where the student has used low-level adjectives. Number 4, where has the student tried to use a professional opinion? How might this be improved? And then number 5, our last question, identify 2 or more ways that the response could be improved. As feedback, check your understanding against the answers below. So we have number 1 then, the tone in the article is aggressive. This is evident in a few different ways. So if you look at the word choice, for example, it says things like force teenagers not to use technology. An example of a hyperbole or exaggeration can be seen in the line, has invaded our homes and infected the minds of teenagers. That's a really good thing to use if you're really trying to overstate how important something is, and that's a really important thing to think about in your question 5. No matter what it is you have to write about, try and really pretend that you care, that it's the most important issue that you've ever wrote about. Number 3. There are a lot of low-level adjectives, and you can use words such as good and bad that aren't really that effective. Think about better synonyms that you can use to make your writing more effective and to get more marks. Number 4. The student tries to use a professional opinion in the line. A recent study from somewhere states, now in order to improve this, the learner needs to include a professional body, so say Oxford University or something like that, or a name of someone from a relevant position or profession. So for example, you could say Bob Smith from the Education Research Association, not that it exists, has said this. Okay, there's nothing wrong with making up people and also organisations as well, just to show that you appreciate that using professional opinions is going to be an effective thing in your writing. Number 5. In order to improve the response, the learner could do many things. So the first thing you might have noticed is that the tone is too negative. So it's saying things like force teenagers not to use technology. It's just too aggressive. It's not going to get the right kind of tone when you're speaking to parents about their children. Next thing we could talk about is the ideas are good, but they need to be expanded upon. So they need to lengthen the paragraphs and use a range of DeForest techniques. You should never look at your paragraph and think, I've used 2 or 3 lines, that should be enough. Have you actually said enough about that topic? Have you really tried to milk it for all it's worth? Have you used your techniques to make it as effective as possible? Next, they could use the punctuation pyramid to use a range of high-level punctuation. Now, if you're not too sure what I mean by that, don't worry about it because we're going to look at it again in the next part of the video. And finally, the response could include more organisational features of a letter. As we looked at in the previous task, we went through how each of these forms of writing are laid out, and you can see it's only actually included the minimum expectation for a letter, and you have to realise that if you are just doing the minimum, it's going to reflect it in the marks that you achieve at the end of the exam. Writing task. So use everything we have covered so far to attempt the tasks below. So the first one then, so the challenge would be to rewrite the passage and make the appropriate improvements. So using the same response that we just looked at, rewrite it. Now this is a good example to do to prepare for your exam. You don't need to actually go and write the full 5 paragraphs, just have a go at 1 or 2 paragraphs here or there and get that practice before the exam. Next, for the super challenge, use the punctuation pyramid to improve the technical accuracy of your writing, and submit your work for marking or for some feedback. If you can't submit it to a teacher, then it's a good idea to submit it to someone else that you are studying this with as well. You can share your ideas and then you can grow together as well. So the punctuation pyramid then, hopefully you're aware of this, we've gone through it quite a few times now, will look something like this, and the name of the game would be, can you get all the way to the lowest section of the pyramid? So if you think about the first 3, for example, you've got full stop, comma, question mark, and exclamation mark. This is what I would consider to be low level punctuation, the kind of thing that I expect at a key stage 3 level. So in order to get a higher mark at GCSE, you need to try and get to the bottom level and use things like your ellipsis, brackets, colons and semicolons to ensure that you're going to get a good mark for your technical accuracy. Now, if you do need any extra help or support, please feel free to get in touch. Alternatively, you can check out our other videos on this channel that goes through every other single question on the exam paper as well. And you can also check out our partner channel, Bookworm Teaching, for more lessons and guidance on all things English. Thanks ever so much for listening, guys, and all the best with your work and your revision in the future. Bye bye.